I want to switch over to North Africa and I want to talk specifically about Algeria in a second. But could you give us a dummy's guide to the rivalries and the tensions that exist in North African football? Like, I know that Algeria and Morocco are big rivals, but I'm assuming that Algeria is also rivals with Egypt and Tunisia and Libya at the same time. Could you just kind of break that down, what the region is like? It's obviously different from the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. Could you just give us, a little outline of what things look like?
Any North African team playing against any North African team is going to be more intense than usual for sure. These North African derbies are something special. But when you talk about like the biggest rivalry in terms of football, it's usually Algeria Egypt. And that's because these teams have clashed together, usually with World Club places on the line, time and time again. And eventually what happens is like sometimes there's diplomatic incidents, a lot of times there's fighting, people have lost eyes literally. There's been Interpol search warrants, people almost cut diplomatic relations. Look up the qualification for the 2010 World Cup, the playoffs between Algeria and Egypt. It's probably the most intense qualifying match of all time, in my opinion. And it happened between, two historic rivals. Algeria and Morocco is different in that things have really ramped up over the last decade or so, but that's because things between the two countries geopolitically have also ramped up. Neighbors, practically the same people, the same gene pools, eating the same food, same religion, same language, everything is the same, but you have two governments that simply cannot get along. A lot of the issues stem from the Western Sahara, which is this non-self-governing territory south of Morocco. Morocco considers it one of its southern provinces. Algeria considers it, like a non-self-governing territory, as the UN does, and that the people there should have their own self-determination. It's a very, very political issue that, get very venomous at times. And the relationship between countries have been, up and down over the years. But essentially, that's been the main issue between the two countries, is that the people, or I should say the group, they're called the Polisario Front, that want independence for that region. Algeria, supports them, and the refugees from the Western Sahara come stay in the southwest corner of the Algerian desert. And Morocco sees that as, Algeria funding separatists. So it gets very, very ugly. But things between the two countries have been very bad over the last 10 years. The border is closed, the land border, the Moroccan planes can't fly over Algerian airspace. And so I don't want to get too political, but my point is like that seeps into the football. And it's been happening with club sides that have had to play one another in the Champions League. The senior national teams haven't had to play each other in about since 2012, I think, or 2011. But if they match up again, especially at an AFCON that's going to be hosted in Morocco, where you're going to have tens of thousands of Algerian supporters, that could get very heated as well. Algeria versus Tunisia is very friendly. It's two sides that played, I think, each other the most, and maybe on the continent. Maybe, I think that's correct. I might be wrong on that, but that's correct. And it's always goes very, very well. It's always a very friendly relationship. And I think Libya just fights everybody. Anybody they play against are always very difficult to play against. So that's just like the basic breakdown. I would say those are the main rivalries. But anytime you get those North African sides playing against one another, it's tough.
Do you think the fact that domestically in Africa, the best leagues are generally in the north, do you think that makes the rivalries even more intense?
Yeah, it can. In the Champions League, like it's a weird one because, like maybe I don't know how much you know about ultra groups, but in Europe, for example, you can often have a friendship with other ultra groups based on your politics. So if you guys are like far left ultra groups that hate anti-fascists or whatever, you guys can have a friendship. In Algeria, it's weird because, or in North Africa, I should say, friendships are not really based on politics. It's more along like these two clubs are rivals in the same city, and these two clubs are rival in another country in the same city. So if these guys play against these guys and there's like some kind of incident or they get into a fight, then these guys are gonna, like they're gonna become friends with their rivals. And so it's a weird one where, as much as those matches can get heated, and if you want to take a look at last year between USM of Algiers and RS Berkane, geopolitics seeped into that club football matchup in the CAF Confederations Cup. At the same time, like there are clubs that become friends with one another across in the same country, the same countries, but these guys will be fighting, and then on the other hand, these guys will have a good relationship. So like most recently, MC of Algiers and Raja Casablanca struck up a really great partnership, and they come to each other's matches and so on and so forth. So it's a club football's weird.
I did a podcast with my buddy from Nigeria a couple months ago. It was previewing the AFCON, and I was asking him kind of a similar question, but more related to Nigeria. Like, let's break down the rivalries a little bit. And he was talking about how there's a big rivalry within the entire African continent between like the Anglophone and the Francophone speaking. How like when it comes to votes for African Player of the Year, which I'm not sure when that award is going to be given, but I think pretty soon the nominees are out. Do you think there's a similar, how should I say, dynamic between like the Arab and Berber countries and the rest of Africa, like whenever there's a heated qualifier game, like I'm thinking like Cameroon, Algeria, something like that. Do you think there's an extra added dimension whenever games like that occur between the two cultural groups, I would say, within Africa?
I would say that these things are more pronounced again on an administrative level. Like if you talk about the Confederation of African Football, seats on the executive committee, so on and so forth. I think it's easier for, French-speaking countries. When you say French-speaking countries, that means they were colonized by the French, and English-speaking countries were colonized by the English. And so usually they have shared histories, maybe shared currencies at times. It's easier for them to coordinate, to get along. I would say it's more that than fans feeling a certain kind of way because another country speaks another language or so on and so